So leave it on, girl.
Welcome, team. I'm sure Lisa will get yourself to introduce you all shortly, but we're talking now Plan Change 6A. So, yeah, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So we are here to discuss Plan Change 6A, which has been launched on the 8th of October. I'll just let the team introduce themselves quickly. I want to go down the line, and then I understand we've got 4 in the Zoom call online, so we'll call on you. The people online will call on you to introduce yourselves quickly after the team that's in the room, the 3 that are here, to introduce themselves.
Kia ora koutou, Cynthia Ward, Principal Development Strategist, Kaingaora, based in Palmerston North, and I've got colleagues online who will introduce themselves after Tim and Patrick introduce themselves.
Hello, Tim So, TS Surveys, representative of the Sue Block.
Patrick Manson, Elevate Surveying, representing Goldrock Block.
Thank you. So that's everyone in the room that's introduced themselves. Zach, you're first up on our list. Then Liesl, Renee, and Phil. If you go in that order, please.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm a Senior Development Planner at Kaingaora.
Kia ora, my name is Liz Albianica. I am a Principal Development Planner for Kaingaora. Nice to meet you all.
Kia ora, my name is Renee Regal and I'm the Manager Community Engagement and Partnerships for our place-based team for Kaingaora, based here in Palmerston North.
Kia ora, I'm Phil Tai, Principal Urban Designer for Kaingaora.
No, thank you. Thanks, team. We'll proceed with the presentation now. So I will start the presentation and then hand over to the application team. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give you a brief rundown of the private plan change application known as Plan Change 6A, and the workshop is to inform you of the plan change process and to assist you with the decision that you'll need to make at the October 30th meeting, which is to either accept or adopt the plan change. So this workshop is for information purposes rather than any other purpose at this stage. So the question we're asking is, does the council require any further information to be able to make that decision on whether to accept or adopt the plan change? And we are in the no space of the triangle. So this slide gives you a brief rundown of the private plan change process. If I can do basically the plan change application has been lodged, so we're at the second, we're in between that first and second step is where we're sitting at the moment. So the next step in the process will be for council to make a decision. Under the RMA, there are 4 options when a private plan change application comes in. You can either adopt, which is when council essentially takes control of the plan change, and pretty much like adopting a dog or a child, you treat it as your own. You can accept it, which means that the applicants will still have full control essentially over the content of the application. And I guess actually stepping back, if council adopts the plan change, then like adoption, you have full financial responsibility for it, but also we will have some control over the content of it. If there's things that we want to change before it gets notified or post notification, there might be some things to work through. Accepting means that we accept it as it is, and the costs lie elsewhere. Rejecting it, there are 5 tests for whether we can reject it, and as you'll see in the report that's coming to you next week, I don't believe any of those tests are met. And then the 4th option is converting the application to a resource consent, and due to the large size of the proposal and the long time frame, I don't think that is an appropriate option in this space. So we're looking for an accept or adopt decision coming up. Just briefly to work through it, the application will require to be notified. We have 4 months to do that from accepting or adopting. We have the first round of submissions. We've published a summary of submissions, further submissions, analysis, and then into the sort of hearing process. And then obviously post-hearing processes, appeals and things like that, but that's a very quick rundown of the plan change process there. So just with regards to the legal aspects of it, the application with the request was received on the 8th of October. So we have 30 working days to make that decision, and I think that the 30th of October meeting is the only one that hits that time frame. I think that 30 days runs out about the 20th of November. And as I've sort of intimated in the last one, I don't believe that the proposal meets the statutory test to reject or convert it, so we're looking to either accept or adopt. A quick rundown of growth area LNW1. So this is the growth area that's at the end of Ryder Crescent and the Kawea Road space next to Western Park. So this area was identified for rezoning in the Horowhenua Development Plan in 2008 and was consequently rezoned under Plan Change 21 to the previous district plan. That plan change was notified in 2009 and essentially has been operative since February 2010, so it has been in the district plan for a long time as a deferred residential zone, which means that the underlying rural zone is kept there, but there is the indication that it's expected to go to residential at some point. Obviously, since 2008, we've had unprecedented growth, and we re-looked at the growth strategy in 2018 and updated it in 2022. And the site is in the current growth strategy as LNW1, and anticipates being upzoned from general residential to a more urban density. The site does contain versatile soils, I think it's class 1 and 2 there, but is exempt from the NPS HPL, the highly productive land NPS, because it is identified for growth within the 10-year time frame in our growth strategy. There we go, I'll hand over to the... Where's that?
Thank you, Lisa, and on behalf of the applicants, thank you for this time this afternoon. So today we have the 3 key landowners associated with this plan change request, and what I'd like to do today is just introduce the team. You'll see how the land ownership is configured in a few slides, but also just to introduce the plan change, some of the site characteristics and the structure plan that's been developed to recognise those characteristics in the neighbourhood context, and also the rationale for adopting the plan change. in particular, as Lease has pointed out, the alignment with your own growth strategy, the benefits to the environment in terms of the lake context in particular, but also the positive benefits in terms of bringing forward some really positively located land for housing. So this first slide, the shot is looking at the site. It's 22 hectares and it's the view taken from rough terms the end of Sudine Road. There's a lake just beyond the shed structure to the top left of the slide. Beyond to the right hand side of the picture there's Western Park, and further beyond on the horizon of that picture is Ryder Crescent. So you can see it's currently in horticultural use. It's flat, but most importantly it really does clip into the existing township structure. The next slide just refers to some of the site visits that have been undertaken with the applicant's team, the experts, also council and Horizons officer. And on this day, the focus was to look at the ecological and natural values of the site. And there's representatives there of Mo'opuku, the Lakes Trust, Horizons, and I think just where our staff is underneath there, there's some shots of our own staff there, and Phil Ty, who's the urban designer. I'm going to pass over to Phil, who is our urban designer, to take you through the next two slides, which talk to the configuration of the structure plan, the land ownership, and the structure plan itself.
Thanks, Cynthia. This diagram shows the land ownership. So the largest block there, 139A, in the teal colour, that's owned by Sue Properties. The mustardy yellow is our land, number 123, that's Kaingora. The purple and the orange blocks are owned by Gold Rock, and then number 10 there is the Luo family. We can just go to the next slide. This is the structure plan, or drawing at least. So the subject site is outlined in red there. So we've got Kauiu Road to the north of the site, Ryder Crescent to the immediate east of the site coming off Tira Road, and then to the south of the site we have Sudine Street coming off Barry Curtis Place, which comes off Queen Street West. To the west you can see the eastern edge of Lake Horowhenua and Mo'opuku Park, and then to the south east of the site is Western Park. And you can see in the location plan to the right there the broad location of where the site is in comparison to Levin Township, which is basically to the south. So the heavy dashed line there denotes the primary access in and out of the site, coming into the site off Sudine Street, and then coming off the northern end of Ryder Crescent there. So that forms a primary access in and out of the site. The other notable feature of the structure plan is the stormwater strategy, which is shown by those three dots throughout the site. So the stormwater strategy is hydraulically neutral and is sympathetic to the way that the stormwater flows over the site at the moment. So those three dots are dry detention ponds, and they would convey the water via a series of roadside swales, ultimately through to that dark green area to the northwest of the site, which is an existing wetland. So the green spaces around the detention ponds would essentially become park areas, open space reserves. You'll also note that the northwestern corner of the Kaingaora site there, land there, is a setback from Patiki Stream, which runs along the northern edge of the site. So there'd be no building in that area, but that provides good opportunity for some open space in the Kaingaora land. The other thing to note is there's an indicative secondary street network there, which is denoted by the lighter grey dotted lines. So that's an indicative street network only, that just does illustrate the potential layout of the site. I think that might be all. Oh, the other thing to note, I guess, is no vehicle access from the site through to Kauri Road. That would only be potentially walking or cycling access. That's probably enough from me.
Thank you, Phil.
Cool.
So just to be clear, we consider this a joint project with council and others. And so the team that are behind this private plan change are the applicants who are represented today, the councils, Horowhenua District Council and Horizons Regional, and the consultancy team who've done a lot of the reports that form part of the appendix of the plan change are listed. So we have reports covering contamination, geology and geotech, archaeology, built heritage and cultural significance, ecology, transport and stormwater. In terms of consultation, there's been quite a lot of work over the 18-month period. The main emphases of the communications plan has been with iwi, the Lakes Trust, the regional councils, the district council, the neighbours and the public. And I'll pass to Renee just to give a bit of a flavour on that consultation. Thanks, Renee.
Kia ora, thank you. So in terms of the iwi consultation, it's been with both iwi Moapuku and Raukawa. So we've constantly engaged with both iwi at that strategic level to make sure that they are fully involved in our proposed plans. They've been fully involved in the consultation. I know potentially we'll talk shortly about the cultural impact assessment as well. Obviously, given the nature of where this particular wider piece of land is, the lake is imperative in terms of that wider amenity. So we have engaged with that Lakes Trust, as Cynthia mentioned. I will talk a little bit just around the neighbours and the public because that's quite important, noting that Kaingaora does and has worked with other landloaders around being open, transparent and meaningful with our engagement. So we did host a session with some neighbours in the direct vicinity of Kauri Road who are also deferred residential and offered up the opportunity. So we hosted a drop-in session for I think it was about 7 owners who are along that Kauri Road area. And talk them through what, particularly this, in terms of what this means for them, what the future impacts might mean, and some of the considerations, noting that they would need to carry out their own due diligence. So we had a great turnout in terms of those private owners who came along to a session at the library to ask us a lot of questions, which we were able to generically answer and move forward with that process. And I understand that those 7 owners have opted not to engage in this particular plan change, specifically including them. So on top of that process, we have also made sure that we have engaged with wider community. So pretty much the direct neighbours surrounding that whole piece of land that Phil shared with you prior, just to let people know what this all means, noting that there is a notification process that council will do as if this is adopted, they will carry that out. So we just wanted to make sure that we did have the neighbours across what our proposed plans were for the plan change, and an open opportunity to engage with us and council around what that generic process looks like and what any concerns or opportunities might be available at early stages. What I can share with you is there's been multiple engagement with those direct neighbours and wider public, and I have received 5 phone calls, and the phone calls have been more around questions such as where is the road and access going to be, how many homes are there, what does this mean for me in terms of home design, and of course we're not even there yet. So a lot of specific questions to future stages of where we're at in terms of this particular plan change.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
So in terms of development timeframes between the applicants, fairly generically, Gold Rock next year or as soon as the rezoning comes through. Kaingaora for more medium term in the 5-year period, and the Sioux land at this point 5 to 10 years, just very generically. I'll pass over to Zach and Lizelle just to talk about the structure plan and the plan change process and some of the rationale around adopting the plan change. Thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. So as discussed earlier in the previous slides by council, the land has been chosen basically through a structure plan process. And why it has been chosen is because it's quite suitable for development at the moment. As mentioned, it's a deferred residential zone, which means it has the intention of being developed into what hopefully we're intending to do with this plan change. So why has it been chosen? It has some really good flat areas, relatively flat areas, and also a low threshold in terms of natural hazards. It's adjacent to the existing urban live-in area. And then, as Phil had shown, has really good links through to that as well, and has been identified as a growth area as well. So through the plan change process, we have used the underlying zones are those of the Horowhenua district plan or the operative plan, but there is a new precinct that we're placing over that is to provide bespoke rules to kind of really respond to the nature of the site and also to respond to the housing shortage that has been identified. So that is made up basically with a commercial zone, a open space zone, and then a residential zone, but with that, the precinct overlay over it. So each zone has its own objectives, policies and rules to make sure that the development achieves the desired objectives and principles. Those include separate ones for each zone, really, and also some overarching ones as well. So the bespoke precinct rules really try and achieve a well-functioning urban environment, which you've probably heard through the National Policy Standard for Urban Development. It is trying to achieve medium density outcomes, so higher densities than what is expected from other more traditional areas within live-in. It's seeking a range of typology choices. The small local centre will be there to support local needs, and there are also objectives and policies to make sure that it doesn't compete with the centre of live-in. And then there's also open space for recreation and the stormwater drainage that Phil touched on as well. I think it's also really key to highlight, and I think Cynthia also highlighted as well, that there has been a significant amount of work between the applicants and the landowners and council officers to bring this the structure plan and all the package of rules together. So it has been a really collaborative process throughout this time to get us to this point, which is quite important to note. And as Cynthia has also approached there, we have had a number of consultants work on this with a number of key reports that have been underpinning the plan change as well. And the stormwater philosophy, which we'll talk to as well, has been peer reviewed by GHD. And then also again, a mediator had also come in, Envelope Engineering, to also discuss that. So the stormwater has been carefully considered for the site as well. And then partly just to touch on another aspect is that we're requesting that council adopt the plan change. We're very much in favour of this, and the reasons for that really is it just recognises the extensive work we've already undertaken with council. It gives the council greater control over what is notified. It allows the council to work with the applicants and landowners to achieve the best outcome, which has already been happening. It implies also that council generally supports the application as well, and that's also just really feeding back into the work that has come along so far. So Kāinga and all the other landowners we've been working closely with council on the plan change, and we therefore have great confidence that the plan change will continue and be implemented as intended as well if adopted. Thanks, and I'll just hand over to Zach.
Yeah, thanks, Lizelle. So as Lizelle mentioned, quite a lot of work has gone into the stormwater design at quite an early stage. We have opted for obviously a soft infrastructure solution, being swales, dry ponds, that sort of thing. And part of the rationale behind this is designing to a 1 in 10 year flood event that the swale system can support, with then overground conveyance to the dry ponds. And there have been quite successful examples of this being done around the country, and it achieves, quite a high alignment with the policies from council. And as part of that as well, also the proposal includes a natural treatment option, so that there won't be an impact on Patiki Stream. And as part of our engagement with council, we've also gone through a mediation process with Envelope Engineering, and we've achieved endorsement from them around the proposed stormwater solution, which will be explored further through the plan change.
Thank you, Zach. I'll just pass over to Patrick just to talk about the stormwater design rationale.
So what we're proposing with the stormwater is to not pipe it. We want to treat it, have a measure of scalability. We've done a lot of soakage testing on the site already. We will be doing more once we've got the plan change adopted through an actual resource consent stage to ensure that the swales that we implement handle the runoff that it's required to do. It's important to note that we will be having on-site soak pits, which is standard practice in Levin, for each of the houses, which will then flow into the roads. And when we talk about a swale, we do have some slides to show a swale. It's not a big rural type swale, it's very shallow, and it's got a soak pit type structure underneath it, which will absorb the water and then disperse it to ground. And it's also not going to be included on every piece of road. There will still be an element of standard swales. We don't need to provide swales for every metre of road, which is a different thing with a pipe. Generally, with a pipe, every metre of road you'd need a pipe. There will be some pipes to transport water through the ponds that we will construct. The ponds will be constructed to be multi-purpose. They are intended to be dry and have a walkway functionality through them with overland flows through to the next block of the development. One of the primary benefits of doing it with the ponding structure and the swale structure that we've got is that each of the stages can be completed independent of another stage, so they're not linked together. One stage doesn't have to go prior to another stage. And then so the water will eventually end up down towards the wetland area, which will be remediated at some point, which will then feed through to Lake Horowhenua with a lot cleaner water than what currently goes there now, courtesy of the market garden activities. So we've had a lot of work and a lot of detail put into the stormwater with 3 external consultants, ourselves and council staff into this, with a lot of reviews and a lot of time spent on it. So we feel that it's a great sponge type approach that is scalable and will work very well. We've also got good overland flow paths which is something different to other parts of Levin. The risk to properties from a failure or an extreme event is very limited because of the general slope of the land runs down towards the wetland, and we can maintain those flow paths throughout each stage with the roading footpath network to convey flows in excess of in a large storm event. That's probably it quickly. So this picture is of a development in Auckland where they used a dry pond structure in a much larger sort of capacity than what we're proposing, but it was wet. That was last year. It was very wet on the Friday, dry again on the Saturday. So that's something like we're trying to implement with the ponds on a smaller structure per stage of what we're capturing water into. And then I think the next slide shows some examples of swales. This is indicative, but not quite what we're intending to do. We'll use standard curb and channel with a standard sump to put water into the swales to prevent people driving on them. But the driveway treatment is something that we may look at doing to allow water to be flowing through. That is a detail that will come through at actual subdivision consent stage. But in principle, that is something like we're looking to implement.
So I'll just fast forward to our last slide.
Oh, can you just go back to that swale one, Cynthia? I just want to go back to the typical section, if you can. This section here is something more typical of what we might produce. Not necessarily at both sides of the road at the same time, but this will be part of the detailed design. So we can see the shallow swale with a rock-filled pit, which is a sort of typical soak pit arrangement with a pipe running through for maintenance and cleaning, which will have an inspection chamber at each end of it to simplify maintenance and allow cleaning. And I just want to explain that piece. Yeah.
So in terms of next steps, as Lease has pointed out, there's the 30th of October meeting where Council will be presented with this option and whether to accept or adopt the plan change. We would encourage the Council to adopt the plan change. It's ready to go, help with providing much needed housing, and it does align with your existing urban growth strategy. And Lisa has just made that final last step about notification having to occur before 28th of February, just to align with the legislation. I guess the applicant team would prefer that notification to be this year, if that was possible. Thank you for your time.
There we go. That's the conclusion of the presentation. So if there's any questions from the floor.
Yeah, I've got a couple actually. Thank you guys and everyone online. Thanks for coming in today and sharing much more detail around what we've received. Just a couple of questions from me. One, appreciate the way it's been presented and the huge amount of work that's gone into the different assessments. Appreciate the way we have been engaged and the input that they've given. I can see that they've given a huge contribution, particularly Waipuku Tribal Authority, and the treatments and the expectations that they have asked for. So I just wanted to note that because I think they've done there's been a lot of good work here. Just a couple of points from me was, I'm interested because when we read the briefing, there was nothing really around the Pātiki stream, and then I note now that there's definitely, and there was nothing in the reports even from the iwi in regard to Pātiki, because I had assumed that it didn't touch it. So I'm just picking up on that point and hoping that whatever that access looks like, there's a treatment for crossing the Pātiki stream in time. So just wanted to raise that one first.
So with respect to the Pātiki stream, the two access points, one from the Sue block and one from the Kaingora block, are existing. We're not proposing to reuse those for anything other than cycle paths and walkways, so probably no change to what's existing there now. The real big benefit we have with this block is that the land doesn't fall towards the Pārtiki stream except for the little piece of the Kaingaroa block which we're going to ring fence into the green space. So no water is going to be discharged that way. So that's why the stuff from the Pārtiki stream was removed, because we're not actually touching it at all. No discharges into it. Yeah.
The other one I was just, what's the size of the reserve area planned in the development? Because I'm interested, because we've got Western Park sitting right there. So where I'm raising it is, I'm interested in what's the size of the area you're going to set aside as reserve for the community. But I'm also interested in, just to follow on, looking at the diagram where I feel like we've missed some opportunities around the use of Western Park. So I've just noted we've got no connection from Douglas Street, we've got no connection from Barry Curtis Place, and we've got no connection from Ryder Crescent. So there's no connectivity to a community space in a park. Is there an intent to connect through this project? Because like I said, if you look at the map, we've got this amazing park sitting there, but not one of those developments around it links to it. So yeah, I just want to know, is there an intent to utilise the park that's there?
The short answer to that on the reserve side of things is not fully defined yet. The pond sizes, the Gold Rock block and the KO block pond sizes are loosely 1,500 square metres each. Aside for that, the on the western side of the Sue block, reading down to the wetland, that's quite a large area that's shown in green. The green areas are not 100% accurate; they're indicative, and the area of that I couldn't tell you, but that will be substantial walkways, linkages through around that wetland to protect the wetland. The total area size is unknown on this, but the intent is that we don't have a road linkage through, as you can see from our main road through to Kawi Road. So that land is sort of landlocked, so that will become a decent sized reserve area in there. The detail of that is not known in terms of the work we've done for the plan change to date in terms of the area of that piece. The Western Park thing's quite interesting, and we've had some plans drawn where we did provide a walkway connection. The intent is absolutely for at least a walkway connection through to Western Park, if not some parking area in the vicinity of that as well, because it does slope down. That's the Luo block where that road is. The last bottom third of that probably slopes towards Western Park. It's difficult you can't get there from the Sue block because of the open drain that's there. Part of the Luo block fronts an open drain. So we have toyed with the idea of a parking space so people can park and access from internal to the development. And the connectivity part is something we've been really conscious of and pushing together for all of us to be working together to connect the blocks together with walkways and roading access. So absolutely the intent is to provide at least a walkway access that will be safe through to Western Park. That is the intent.
Small closed.
And then I suppose I just encourage
I'll just
work with you guys to try and make something like that connection happen. Thank you.
I just sorry if I can just add a couple of little points here. The first point is that you've only had basically a sampler of the plan change documentation. We didn't want to overwhelm you with just this workshop, but rest assured that the full plan change documentation will be attached to the report that is coming to you, I think, Tuesday next week, in preparation for that meeting on the 30th. The second point is obviously the issue of Western Park is could form part of your decision whether to accept or adopt the plan change, because obviously if council wants more connectivity with Western Park or more consideration of Western Park, adopting the plan change would give council the ability to make changes in that regard. So we have the plan changes presented at the moment, but we would have that option. And then obviously council will be well aware of the recent history of Western Park. and the treatment of that there.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump on that. So wearing the hat as the chair of the district plan steering committee, you'll recall, Councillor Tamahana, that this was brought to the steering committee around whether we had a wider view of the area or took a more narrow view. So it's relevant to the adopt versus accept discussion, and the initial signal given by a majority of members of that steering group was to not include Western Park within the scope of the district plan, because there was a lot of uncertainty around what our aspirations for that parcel of land is in terms of, is it kept as a reserve 100%, is it partial development? So that has, to be fair to KO and council, that's kind of steered probably the approach to the plan change so far in terms of the looking at connectivity and those kind of things. But I just wanted to pick up on a question for the team, because Renee expressed a preference around that council adopts the plan, and so I think that's a really great, clear signal for us. But the question is, obviously, KO's in a particular political context at the moment, just in terms of some constraints around what it can and can't do. And so if council decided to not adopt but accept, what does that look like for you guys in terms of sequencing, timing, budget? Is there some constraints in terms of the decision that council might make? And so clearly heard preference for adopt, but what happens if council's preference was in the accept sort of space?
I can't wholly speak for Kaunga-Ora, but I can say in terms of the development time frame, the first motivated developer would be Gold Rock. So there is a definite intent. The decision here is really around the timeliness and whether you want the structure plan now. I think there's advantages in adopting from a timeliness point of view. We will continue our own process. We're still committed to this land and seeing an opportunity here. And should it pass the rezoning gateway, then my role would be as an investment strategist is to look at that opportunity. So that's what we call Gate 2. It's like the strategic business case, similar to like a Kotahi. So it's a piece where the decision makers will look at all the options on the table. So at this point, we're definitely committed to the rezoning, and timeliness is important to us. I will pass it over to Patrick because it's a application team.
It's difficult. I guess I will explain my history. I've been working on this on the Gold Rock block for probably 6 years, with lodging consents, having consents rejected, standard subdivision consents, trying to just get it through while it was still zoned rural. There's been significant sums of money expended to get to this point. Stormwater, we're talking probably $40,000 to $50,000 on investigations to date. So, in terms of the partnership, we want to partner with council to finish off the last square if you like, of urban living, the last piece of the puzzle. It links in really well. It's got a lot of positive attributes to it in terms of mitigation of stormwater effects. No downstream properties affected by stormwater. Connection to the sewer network, roading network is solid. So we want the partnership with council. It would be quite a difficult conversation to have from our end, and I'll probably speak for the other land, the Sue Block on that as well. Yeah.
Thanks for the really useful. I just wanted to clarify my understanding of your response to Sam's question there. So essentially, beyond adopting the plan change or accepting it, there is no guaranteed KO funding at this point in time for the next stages after that.
In terms of investment and planning, we do have a budget to do an opportunity memo, but it is conditional on actually having the land rezoned.
All right, cool. Thank you all. Appreciate you, Patrick, and coming in and helping KO with that. Yeah, get into it, Lacey, thank you. The others will get here eventually.
All good. Kia ora koutou. I'm actually just introducing this kaupapa this afternoon, and then I'll let my very capable team take the lead. You all know Sean Hester, our Parks and Property lead, and you are probably used to seeing this redhead as a blonde, Jodie Simmons, previously Laogo. Yes, exactly. And Jodie is our asset management, rental and leases coordinator. So just a reminder of why we're here. Through the long-term plan process, Council has added an action that officers undertake a stock take on lease agreements and report back to Council with this information, including an assessment on the current leasing policy. This briefing is to provide a high-level overview of that stock take and assessment. I know we have shared some of the more detailed information as part of the pre-reading. However, I just want to remind councillors that this is an open briefing and some of that information is commercially sensitive. So any questions will need to be generic, or alternatively you can direct specific questions to me outside of this meeting. Jodie has done a lot of investigative work leading up to this, but we are very aware that more mahi needs to be done to get the lease portfolio working as we would want it to be. Just want to reiterate that we do have higher level information available at this stage, but some of the more detailed information that you might want may have to come back at a later stage. Cool.
We will crack into it. So, as directed by Council, officers have undertaken a comprehensive review of the Council lease portfolio, identifying the current status of each agreement as well as any legacy issues. So, this review provides Council with an overview of the portfolio and outlines the necessary actions required moving forward. We are now seeking guidance on Council's priority regarding the lease portfolio and the strategic direction that should be pursued. We are also seeking whether there is a view for any appetite for a review of our current commercial and community leasing policies. Officers have identified an area of improvement which would strengthen particularly the commercial leasing policy. However, the community leasing policy will require a broader discussion as to whether the level of subsidy available to be provided is pitched at the right level and in relation to the subsequent costs to ratepayers. Onto the triangle. So by the end of this presentation, you will know what work we have done, what work needs to be done, and also be able to provide us feedback on how to move forward. So just what are we asking for? To reiterate, we are seeking your guidance on how we move forward with our work on the lease portfolio, and if you have an appetite for us to review the current policies. We are not seeking a full review, however, there are sections of the policies that have been identified as needing a review. So on this slide here is a brief background summary of the review conducted. Also noting that in the pre-reading you were provided last week, we said there were 84 leases. Since then, we have added 2 more leases, which further demonstrates that this portfolio is very fluid and ever-evolving. During the review that was conducted, information on each agreement was extracted so we could identify the category each lease should sit under, depending on the work required on it. And we'll look into this further on the next slide. So here we have the lease breakdown. This slide further breaks down the previous slide, outlining the category of each lease. This also shows the grazing and license to occupy agreements separately, but they are classed under the commercial leasing policy. You'll also see that 57 of our leases were identified as being in place prior to our leasing policy that was adopted by Council in 2017. Therefore, we are restricted with those, and what we can do is we're bound by their individual clauses. The 7 leases acquired with the purchase of property are all directly related to the Levin Town Centre redevelopment project, in which the properties purchased had pre-existing leases that we've taken over. And this is a broad summary of the work required for each lease. So the no immediate action means the leases are currently active and current. However, while we continue to work through the legacy issues, these leases will require renewals and reviews throughout. Therefore, consistent monitoring is still required to prevent further issues compounding. The expired leases are ones where the agreement have expired, however the tenant still occupies the space and pays regularly. These require officers to reach out to the leasee and seek their intentions and supply them with an agreement that's within the guidelines of our policy, ensuring for the future everything is recorded officially and we can monitor renewals and finances. The rent review and renewals overdue are leases that are still current but have rolled into the next term without any acknowledgement or have not had their rent reviewed. This has resulted in multiple leases remaining on the same rental amount for the life of their lease, rather than being reviewed 3 yearly as our current policy requires. The undocumented agreements are agreements in which I could not find any signed documentation confirming the status of the lease. There are also cases where the only record we have for them are email trails or financial statements that show the proof of occupancy as an agreement.
Over to me. Thank you for that, Jody. I'm just going to go into not too much detail, but just a little bit of an overview about the existing policies. Firstly, being the community leasing policy, and then secondly, the commercial leasing concessions and permit policy. Before I do want to emphasise to councillors that although it's been incredibly useful for HDC and particularly our team as well in managing the lease portfolio. I just want to emphasise that the backlog of work in this area is largely about the legacy issues that we have, and they're based on one-off political decisions at the time those leases came up. And we cannot apply these lease policies retrospectively to those leases. Essentially, they are legal agreements locked in with both parties, and both parties have to agree to any changes in them. Over time, I think that issue will lessen or ease as any new leases that are entered into as old ones expire are based on these policies. So I just wanted to give councillors that context. In terms of the community leasing policy, the criteria really is the key elements there are that people or groups have to be incorporated societies or registered charities, not-for-profits, but also includes clubs, but not private members' clubs. They can't be as exclusive as that. This is to apply for the community leasing policy settings to apply. Applicants must demonstrate. I think this is the large aspect of the community leasing policy is it must contribute to council's outcomes that it's trying to achieve, both through the LTP and its visions and goals as well. Both policies have a point in there that if it's over 5 years that lessees are seeking, that a council resolution is required and that account can't be signed off by management. Another key factor about the community leasing policy is that we have a formula in that document or in that policy to calculate the lease rental that we come up with. It's based on either between 1 to 4% return on the rateable value of the legal title. But of course, as probably people can appreciate, a lot of the time the title is a lot larger than the leased area, so it's prorated on that basis. In terms of the criteria in the policy, it's also quite a factor of this one, the community aspect of this one, where essentially we apply a subsidy, through a formula to that lease. So it's worked out on the 1 to 4% return of the rateable value, but then a scoring system is applied to see what the level of subsidy is applied to that. Just going on to the commercial leasing policy and the key elements in that. Basically, it applies to reserve land. Sorry. Yeah, go.
Yes, can you flick back a couple slides? Where you keep going. One more. Oh, another one. Oh, you had a not-for-profit number down here. Maybe it's. Keep going. Oh. Didn't you? I'd say go back. Yeah.
You mentioned not for profit. Yeah.
I think you did, didn't you, Jodie? No? Oh. This obviously isn't in the pre-reading, so I'm seeing those pie graphs for the first time, and I thought I saw a number on there that said 6 or 7 not-for-profits. Where was that? No. Same thing. It's hallucinating, maybe.
I might just jump in while there's a pause. You said that one of the issues is that obviously some of these agreements predate the policies. Presumably, and I see we don't have a column in the table yet, about end date or review date or ability to terminate and renew or renegotiate, like, because there'll be a clause in there that covers one of those. Is that, yeah, I mean, I imagine that the policy still applies to any of these agreements where there is a renewal date coming up or that's coming forward, like, because we've got to look through this lens, right?
In terms of the policy, the full term of the lease applies essentially. So if the original agreement has a right of renewal period in it, the existing conditions or terms and conditions of the lease apply, is my understanding. So when a lease has a final expiry, and say for example a right of renewal has not been taken up, or it's the very end of that lease, that's when a whole new lease applies, and the policy will kick in. Essentially, the commercial leasing policy applies to reserve land. It applies to land that's zoned open space, commercial, general, and endowment properties. It doesn't apply to the management of council halls and how we manage that process, or other community facilities. But a key point in there to it, and this is where I guess the word commercial comes into it, is that the rental calculations are based on either a market valuation, which is specific to that lease land or building, or where that's not available, a return of 6% on the land value. And again, the commercial leases have to go to council for a resolution if it's over 5 years. Just continuing on that, there are quite a few. It specifies in the leasing policy about the concession type. So a lease will be granted where they need exclusive possession of that land, or if the term is 1 or more years, or if there's, say, for example, it's significant expenditure to build a new building on that, or an improvement, for example. Another aspect of the types of legal agreements we enter into are licenses, and that's really about where you don't need exclusive possession, and also that the term is under 12 months as well. Where it kicks in, where it's just a specific event, we use a permit system. In terms of commercial leases on reserves, again, it's that market rate applying, and we'll only consider a rate less than that if there are other factors that come into play, which you can read there. The license to occupy, that's again an annual license fee based on the commercial rate of the rateable land value, and where it's where the license will be for a building, the annual fee will be based on that market valuation as well. I'm handing back over to Jodie.
All right, great. Continuing on. So this slide shows the income received for our leases over the previous financial years. You'll note the indicative forecast for the income for this financial year has increased significantly due to the commercial properties we've taken over the leases of. So in the next slide, we'll detail briefly what the difference between the income received and the expenditure we pay for some leases is. Okay, so this slide shows the difference between the income received versus the expenditure council pays to maintain these sites and properties. The costs above are estimated due to the legacy issues of income and expenditure not being coded correctly and therefore not captured in these figures. And some of this expenditure is related to our sports fields because we haven't been able to break down the expenditure directly related to these leases. Work is being done to deep dive into this to ensure we capture everything required going forward. The sports ground lease listed is a part of the community leasing policy and is a lease of Western Park. It is listed separately to show the difference in its expenditure due to the maintenance requirements of a sports ground in comparison to a standard property. And while there are other parks bookings on the site for other sporting codes, they are booked for under 16s, and as per our policy, there's no charge for that age group. We have also recently conducted an additional review of the leases, extracting the outgoing requirements of each lease. This was done to identify what each tenant is responsible for paying in addition to their lease amount. Officers have been working in conjunction with the finance team to build a report that will identify the outgoing charges for each property. And using that data collected and the report from finance, we should be able to begin on charging our lessees with the outgoings they're responsible for. And this will hopefully result in an increase in income and a decrease in expenditure once completed. So going forward with that, Finance and Parks and Property will be meeting on a 2-monthly basis to work through the debt management issues, lease specific only. On this slide is an example of the financial impact of the amount of subsidy some leases are provided if they meet the requirements of our community lease policy. All leases used as an example above qualified for the 90% subsidy available, which shows there is a clear difference between the actual income versus potential income. It is also important to note that there are leases where the subsidy is essential to allow groups to operate. For example, the Foxton Beach Community Centre provides essential shuttle services to the Foxton community, and without the subsidy provided on their lease by our policy, they would not be able to afford to offer this service, which would be a significant loss for the community. And I will pass back over to Sean.
Thanks, Jodie. In terms of the commercial leasing policy, I just did want to highlight one key area that we could consider with councillors here, and that's to do with the licence to occupy and the kind of the permit or trading section in this policy. What we've found, and myself as an officer, I've had a lot of examples where private traders have come along engaging with council about potential use of council land, and one of the key things there is that, as officers, when we know that there's activity like this going on public land, is that we need to know when and where they are there. For example, if there are any issues that result from complaints with the public, or if there's any issues of any nature, officers need to know when and where those people are trading on that public land. That's tended to be a little bit of a deterrent for some of these traders in terms of the policy as it's set out, in that it becomes financially a big burden for them. And because we're in discussions with them at this very beginning point, without actually having instigated and them started trading, it does tend to put a lot of them off. So what we are looking at doing is some kind of balance or trade-off there, where we're essentially saying that we're proposing a cap on the annual amount that they are charged as a trader on that public land. So what we're proposing there is $1,000 cap per annum. We feel that will there is a lot of public good that comes out of a lot of the traders that we're talking about here. So we're trying to strike that balance between making that happen and the public good that comes out of it versus the return that we get back from them for ratepayers for the use of that public land as well.
A good example of where this might apply would be okay, I'll leave. I'm just pondering.
Thanks, Councillor. The alfresco dining is kind of treated slightly separately to that. What I am talking about here is, I'll give an example, is the trading on, say, reserve land, say Foxton Beach car park, where they're not set up permanently as such. It's more they're looking at days to trade in a certain area within that car park, for example.
Can I just add in there, because this has come up recently? We find that we're at risk if we, apply the specifications for those permits to trade for the car park, for example, and if businesses are then put off, they go there anyway. And so we have been trying to strike that balance of getting income where possible at maximum amount for our ratepayers, while also not putting people off applying and then just pushing their luck and trying to trade anyway.
You'll obviously define what is a trader in the policy. Like, I mean, you've given an example, but if the alfresco dining is different, then you're shaking your head.
So I think that Jodie and I just had a conversation. We do treat alfresco dining with a permit to trade.
So on that, guys, because I've dealt with this a couple of times myself with mobile traders coming, when you advocate for them to have certain spots around the place. $1,000 cap, would that give them a range of places that they, say, Foxton Beach, Wairariri, that they could, or just one place? What? One. So it'd be $1,000 for each place? Well, okay.
Up to. It's a cap.
It's a cap. Right, okay. Because some of them come to places like Foxton Beach, Wairariri, where there's things happening. Over the summer, obviously, where it's very popular, and they are very popular. And they're really good to see because they provide people with an option, So it's really a way of making sure we get some return for the ratepayer, but also giving that the benefit of what they sell to the community, particularly when places get influx with holiday makers and whatnot. So just some flexibility around and some encouragement, I guess, that they can do that and provide that service to the community, but also we get some return.
I don't think it was ever intended that was going to be the final place where we land. It's really just a discussion point as well. So, as you can see, it's trying to strike that balance between making it happen versus actually the return to ratepayers that's appropriate.
Sorry, can I just say, because one of the things I've been reflecting on, and I agree with what Ross just said, but we've also got to try and create a fair playing ground as well, because we've got fixed locations and retail premises that are paying rates and food and services licensing and all that kind of stuff. And so we don't want to end up in an unintended consequence where it's far preferable to operate from a van in a park than it is to have a fixed location bordering the park, for example. So there's a kind of balance in those considerations. You guys know that, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things that we have also got in place is kind of a limit for the number of traders per area. So, for example, Foxton Beach car park limit of 3, and it's not conflicting trade, so we can't have 3 ice cream vans, for example. That's just one example.
Okay, moving on to the community leasing policy. We don't have anything as more specific about that one, but what I guess the obvious point about this one really is with councillors is discussions about the level of subsidy that's provided as a calculation for the rental figure that's arrived at. You can see there's a number of criteria that they need to meet to as we do that scoring, like for example the legal status of that entity, a really important one being the relevance of their services to the community outcomes in the LTP.
Is there any consideration around this is what the price would or should be, and it's discounted to this amount?
so they can actually see the value they're getting out of, or the exact amount that ratepayers are subsidising for their use, their club or whatever it is. Because I'd rather see it worked backwards, as in, this is what it is, but this is what you pay. So, and then that's transparent too for the people.
Thanks, Councillor Piri. That's a very good point, and it's not something we've been very explicit about doing, but it's a very good point, and it also goes wider too, to not just the individual, company or group that we're dealing with, but also to the wider public as well, about the level of investment from a community point of view that the council is providing to the community.
Yeah, if when we're adding additional columns to this table, if we could have one that was, calculated annual rent of what it should be for generic purposes, just for comparison.
Market rate.
Yeah, market rate of rent.
Sorry, just butting in here. I also, there is other, it's not income per se, but there are other discussions that happen within the leasing negotiations when it comes to a community lease as well. So discussing, covering of the ongoing charges, so whether it's utilities and rates as well. So we have been certainly more aware of the need to incorporate those aspects within the lease going forwards. So trying to be generic and not single out numbers and things. In the column where it says insurance and it says holds own or excess only, does a no mean no, they don't pay the insurance, council does, or actually there's no insurance at all for it? What does the no's mean?
The no's mean that it doesn't specify it in the lease, which means that there's no insurance. It's up to the tenant then if they would wish to hold insurance. When it says holds own, it specifies in the lease that lessee must, to comply with their agreement, must hold that specified insurance. So yes, the no means that there's no insurance. Sorry, no insurance requirements.
So we're just going to go very briefly into what we're proposing as a work program about the lease portfolio. Obviously, it's an ongoing piece of work that we're continuing to do work on, but what we're suggesting to councillors is the following approach. So a two-stage approach, essentially, about trying to bring the lease portfolio to a much better state that everyone's happy with. Stage one being from sort of now over the next 12 months is to be assessing all of the outgoings, as Jody has mentioned, lease by lease, and then reconciling them with what is being charged out by council to ensure that compliance, and then any anomalies, for example, any gaps, are communicated to those lessees so we can tidy that up. Assessment of all of the overdue rent reviews is undertaken and then resolved, including that communication and agreement with the lessees. Assessment of expired leases, and then obviously correspondence with the lessees to enter into new leases. So we're having to estimate, based on what we've done to date, that we are thinking that's probably about 80% of the lease portfolio. And we do feel that there should be a lot of energy put into that in the next 12 months so that we can progress those sort of easy wins, those simpler kind of lease scenarios, as well as those kind of willing and compliant kind of lessees to get to pull those agreements into line. And we're more than happy to provide updates to council at a regular interval so you can track progress. What we're considering for that stage two, it's really from now until say June 26, is the balance of those leases. So about 20% of them we believe are have a lot more unresolved issues that may be much more complex, and take a lot more research and agreement to resolve. Some of those may actually include increased legal cost as well, given that officers may require that expertise. Again, we can provide updates to councillors about our progress at regular intervals as well. So it's not quite as clean cut with this, but that's what the approach that we're proposing. And do we have any questions? Any further questions?
With the by and large the half that are either expired or need renewing, whatever they are, that I'm interested to know their how active they are now, whether their membership is still strong or there's just a few left occupying a significant piece that a larger community group could be using. I don't know if anyone asked what the FROR was in the table, but I'm like, okay. And then the purple blanks, also where it says yes or no to rates, is it yes we're paying or yes they pay? And if it's no, is it us? Like it's not clear who's paying the rates, them or us. And then question about Parekawo, I thought that was docks. No, right, cool. And then yeah, if we can ask more specific things offline, is that right, Lacey? Okay.
So just to answer your question about the rates, if it says yes, that means that the lessee pays. If it says no, that means that council pays.
Okay, in that case, in that column, can you put the amount that we are paying? Because like if council's paying the rates, what is that number next to the amount? Like if they're paying $200 a year and no rates because we're paying that, that alone is a lot of money too.
Just a question. So if you can go back to that last slide which showed you the different stages, that's really focusing on the current leases. And so acknowledge that policy review is not within the scope of our plan on the page or priorities. So not suggesting that we need to do too much work there. But I wonder if we could think about, because it's ultimately the money side of things and how we calculate what's a fair return. And I'm wondering if we could focus on maybe an appendix, and particularly to both policies that might have a bit more of the methodology or something, because we've just done the public places bylaw, which has the stick, right, in terms of the consequence if people don't follow the permitting function, all that kind of stuff. But we probably just need to do the principle-based thinking around, what is the right methodology to actually set the fair amounts, like if there are different circumstances, because there are probably are different considerations that if it's al fresco dining versus an ice cream van versus someone who wants to do a weekend community market. Like, I don't know, like if that's getting too granular, but perhaps that could be something that's just part of that stage 2 or at the latter stage of stage 1 is like, some sort of just addendum to the policies that kind of might expand on or provide a little bit more detail around it. That's just my thinking. I don't know what you think of that as an idea.
I think that's a very good idea, and we could possibly have, scenarios as well. Just as an example, that are more, they're not actual examples, but they're,
You also mentioned a formula in the first policy. Is that in review, or because you said not every aspect of the policy is being reviewed? I think it was the first one, the formula. Is that being looked into?
It's more that the formula is quite set in there, and the level of subsidy gets driven based on that scoring of those outcomes that they demonstrate. What is probably, I'm not sure that we're potentially ready for, that councillors have enough information to actually assess whether that subsidy level is right. It may be that, with more data over the next sort of 6 to 12 months, that actually becomes a bit more evident.
Is ultimately trying to achieve more consistency here based on this open forum. I'll just do roundabouts, but when groups are sometimes paying $5 or to $200 and then upwards of that, and the type of groups that I can see that they are, I don't think this is fair. Just put it plainly. So it's either the formula is wrong or something's not quite right.
So the policy which came in 27 has a minimum of $200 per annum based on meeting certain criteria. If they have met some, therefore they get up to 90% subsidy. So anything below $200 was set prior to the policy.
Yeah, but there's subsidies on subsidies here when you think this is what it's worth and should be paid for, but we're given it for that, as well as, and you don't have to pay rates on top of that. Some of you will maintain these buildings, some of you won't. It's just money on top of money, and ultimately the ratepayer is fitting the balance. And we've got I hear about the balance, striking the balance, but I'm looking for consistency as well.
I just want to add to that the a lot of those issues that you described and that inconsistency are based on those legacy issues pre the policy. The policy is helping to drive that consistency over time, but unfortunately, those when those legal agreements are locked in place, we have to let them run their course. No, it's not that. It's more that they have a term and then they've been done pre these policies, so we can't apply these policies retrospectively.
I entirely agree with that either. That's why you have policy reviews and you make policy changes, and then whoever it applies to, it applies to them as a new policy. But anyway, that happens in anything you do. Do an amendment to a contract, and you live with what the new conditions are of that. Anyway, for me, I definitely want clarity around the 9 right of refusal properties, because I can't find them identified in the chart. In the what sold, terminated and evicted, I can tell a couple of the leasing ones, but I don't know what the other properties are, so I'm definitely interested to understand what category they sit in. Support the policy review as actually being urgent, so while it might not be a long-term plan or top priority, I think it is a priority. If our ratepayers are subsidising hugely across our community for these types of activities. And I also support Councillor Tuapua, her point around what an actual market cost to facilitate any of our properties is to be there. I think that's important to show what it would actually cost any person that wanted to operate in there, and then what the subsidy is from the ratepayer for them to take up a home in that space. On top of that, I'm also interested in some of these people will get funding through other means. So I'm actually interested in when we do mass subsidisation like this on one side, and then they're also coming to us and applying to us for grants and other things, then that for me is another, like Councillor Tuapua, that's just another tack on, and again another cost that our ratepayer pulling out of their pocket. So those were the main ones for me. Thanks.
Sorry, can I just answer the question around first right of refusal? Most of those are to do with endowment properties.
Yeah, I'd like to have them categorised because they should be noted under the endowment review process.
Yep, they are. Yep. And sorry, just one other aspect that I thought we could add into the policy review is adding in wording around what could be standardised in leases, such as paying utilities and rates. I kind of feel like there's an appetite for that around the table.
Within the existing community reduction policy, there's no review or compulsion to look at the financials of the entity that's applying for said lease. Because to Justin's point, there are other avenues for a lot of these community groups for all the good works that they do to access funding and support for the mahi that they're doing that then wouldn't come as a cost to the ratepayer. And I think being able to look or understand what their financial backing looks like and what their ability to access other streams of funding is something worthwhile having a look at, because if you look down the list of organisations here, you've got your groups that you'd identify as maybe fall into the category that they wouldn't be sustainable if they had a significant cost. And there are other groups in here that would be absolutely able to fund or afford to pay a reasonable cost to council to reduce that ratepayer cost. So I think kind of having a lens around some policy or process where they disclose the strength of their financial position could be helpful. And most of that information is publicly available anyway, depending on the type of entity it is.
I couldn't find the land at the Shannon railway station on here for the EVs. The exclusive reserved parking 24/7 that they get and no one else can use, but it's free. Pay for that in Auckland. How much is a car park? 365 days of the year.
We'll follow up on that one. Yeah. Any other questions? No? I got a thumbs up, thank you.